Hi. Categories. Many American people are unaware that they can travel to Cuba. Many Americans don't know how easy it is to travel to Cuba. Now you don't need to prove, you don't need to ask for permission. You can only contact a travel agency in the United States and tell them that you want to travel to Cuba. They will give you a visa. You sign the visa, and then you have to mark under which category you are traveling to Cuba. It's easier than many people believe. Anyway,
Let me make it very clear that as from December 17, 2014, the government of the United States decided to expand or authorize 5 other reasons why Americans would be allowed to go to Cuba. The fact is that there were 7 categories. Then those other 5 would make it a lot easier for Americans to find a reason to go to Cuba. Let's go directly into which are those 12 valid reasons for Americans to be able to travel legally to Cuba. Also, it's very important to make it very clear that Americans are not supposed to travel to Cuba on tourism. So tourism, going to the beach, is not a valid reason. Which are those 12 valid reasons? The first one is family visit. Obviously, you need to have the second point of that first category, which is if you are a Cuban national. Number 2, official U.S. government business as well as journalist activities. There are many freelance journalists. You are allowed to go to Cuba as a freelance journalist as long as you can prove that you are someone who is regularly employed as a journalist, supporting broadcast or technical personnel, freelance journalists with record of previously working as such in other projects. This means that if you decide to be a freelance journalist today and you want to go to Cuba tomorrow, you probably won't qualify within these categories because you need to have a record of having done this freelance journalist activity before. We go into the 4th category, professional research and meetings. Research directly related to the traveler's professional background. That is, if you are a scientist on any branch of science, you are allowed to go to Cuba to do some of these researches. Professional meeting is not for the promotion of tourism and directly relates to the traveler's professional background. Okay, you can go to Cuba as long, to meet professionally or to participate in events of this sort, as long as it is not an event or meeting aimed at promoting tourism. Remember, as I said at the beginning, tourism is not a valid reason to go to Cuba. You cannot go to the beach or just go to Cuba to go to the beach. You're not allowed. So far. Then we go into the 5th category, which is a long one. I'm just going to briefly pan through it. Is educational activities. Educational activities like persons, academic institutions, and their faculties, staff, and students who travel for it. You can go to participate in structured education programs that offer credits by graduate or undergraduate degrees. Obviously, there are several points here that kind of support this specific category. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can always go into the website for OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is the institution that regulates these categories and supervises the people that go to Cuba under one of these categories. So within these educational activities also for the people-to-people travel. And this is one of the most used categories under which Americans travel nowadays. This is, as it says, the category in itself says, is people to people. The reason for this category to exist is only that the American travelers who want to go to Cuba to encounter, to meet people, the people of Cuba, participate in activities which are like day to day for the Cuban people, visit the basic facilities there, etc. And that's pretty much what the people to people is. These activities are to have an organized itinerary from day to night, and are not supposed to have a lot of recreational time for the traveler. Then we go into the religious activities. Obviously, if you're a member or staff of religious organizations located in the United States, obviously these will require also probably a visa from the Cuban government, but this is one of the authorized categories.
Hello, this is Ernesto Juan from Sudan Productions, and today we are going to continue talking about traveling to Cuba legally from the United States.
Number 7 would be public performances, clinics, workshops, athletic and other competitions and exhibitions. Obviously, if you're going to Cuba to participate in a competition, in an exhibition, if you're going there to perform or be part of a workshop, you're authorized to go. Support for the Cuban people. This is, I would say, the most used category under which many people travel, because it covers or gives the coverage to many activities that could also fall into it. Of course, it is not, probably in some cases, it's not being used as it should, but it's quite open, so it kind of allows, and I'm going to read this one in specific. Support for the Cuban people, activities to work with recognized human rights organizations, independent organizations which promote a peaceful transition to democracy or strengthen civil society in Cuba. As I said, it's very open. This is very subjective, I would say, because whatever you do when you go to Cuba, you participate in social activities there, try to explain to the people of Cuba how the American democracy works, that could be considered the third article of this category, which is strengthen civil society in Cuba. So as I said, it's very open, it's very subjective, so many things could fall into that. Then you have humanitarian projects, support of medical and health related projects, construction projects, environmental projects, projects for formal or non-formal educational training, etc. This is more specific. Obviously, when you're talking about humanitarian projects, you need to actually have the necessary elements to substantiate this sort of category. And obviously, if you're really going into that sort of travel to Cuba, it's very easy to substantiate, because I'm sure you would have prepared your travel accordingly. Number 10, activity for private foundations or research or educational institutes with an established interest in international relations to collect information for non-commercial purpose. Very clear. Any sort of research for or sort of studies that you want to perform in Cuba, which are non-commercial. So you're not going there to perform a survey for a company in the States that is going to pay you. That's not the sort of activity that you're supposed to do under this category. Exportation, importation. If you wish to consult a little bit more about it, you can always go to the website of